start with about the time of the Depression, because that's when really it started. He worked as a bartender. The Depression came and things got very bad. And he was fired. And he had nothing, no means of earning a living. And then, I don't know what came afterwards, but in the interim, World War II and World War II was over. All the veterans came back.
Oh, absolutely.
They didn't have jobs. So in order to have a job, they bought whatever store, bar, or anything they could, and they bought the bar where Grandpa was working. That was the second time. He was fired. And then, to make matters worse, while they came back from the war, they needed a place to live. So many of them bought two-family homes, and we lived in a two-family house. So we were evicted. So Grandpa had no work, and we had no place to live. It was not a good time. Anyway, I had an uncle called Harry. You know Harry. He had some money, and he said to my father, "Do you want to come in and we'll be partners?" So my father said, "Of course." So he went into business with his brother, and they really worked. There was nothing like a day off. You worked 7 days a week. He got into work 7 in the morning, and they had to clean up, and he worked until, I don't know, 4 or 5 at night, when he came home, and he was tired, hungry, and then another day started. And then I was about maybe 6 or 7. My mother got TB. TB at that time was bad. It was also, they sent people away to a sanitarium. They didn't keep them in the house. My mother had a very young doctor, fairly new, and he said, "I'm not going to send you away. I'm going to keep you home. I'm going to collapse one lung." And she had to go for injections of air, I don't know. And it was a hard time again, because we lived in an area where it was living room, dining room, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And suddenly, my mother had to stay home, and she had to have a room for herself. So my grandmother came to live with us. She stayed with me. We took the dining room, made it a bedroom. My mother slept there for 6 months. Grandpa stayed in the bedroom, and that was it. And It was a rough time. It was a rough time for me because as I was a kid, I didn't realize what was going on. And I was an only child, so I was told, shh, don't make noise. Get your mother sick again. So I had very strict rules. And thank God, she got better. I put the house back the way it was. And then she got sick again. On the other side. Well, by this time, the doctor was a pro. So it took my mother less time to get well. And we went through some rough times. Growing up.
She had a trach.
Yeah, at one point, I don't remember it exactly, she couldn't breathe. So she had to have a tracheotomy.
I've seen that one.
And at that time, oh yeah, that's another part of the history. They went to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, same Mount Sinai.
Someone was born there, right?
And she needed an operation. And they said to her, no money, no operation. There was no insurance. At that time, there was nothing. And I remember my mother had 4 sisters. One of them owned Ben Tucker Hudson Bay Fur Company. And he was rich. In those days, he was rich. He advertised on radio, and I still remember it. Ben Tucker, 557 Fulton Street, 12 DeKalb Avenue. The store went right through and an entrance on either side. And my father had no money, so he called up his brother-in-law. And Ben said, come over. There was no thing as credit cards or any of those things. My father came over. Ben took a brown paper bag and stuffed money in it. And he said to my father, go to Betha's room, or Mount Sinai, or if it's not enough, come back and I'll give you more. That's when my mother had the operation. And she was always self-conscious. She wore necklaces which hid the hole. She was always self-conscious about that.
So did your dad really make alcohol at home?
They made bathtub gin and they made it in the bathtub.
Well, yeah.
How they made it, I have no idea.
Oh, come on, Bubby.
Harvey, I don't know if he showed it to you, had an article in the paper, I think of Newark, and he sent it to me, about this Putty Hincus, the gangster of Newark, making liquor. He was a friend of my father's. They were all in the liquor business.
I just had to read The Great Gatsby in English class.
They were all in the liquor business. I even met this Putty Hincus. We belonged to a swim club.
Is that his real name?
What?
Is that his real name?
I have no idea what his name was. They
Putty
called him
Hincus.
Putty.
Putty
I'm
Hincus.
sure that was not his name. Hincus, and his wife was a model, show girl,
Doesn't get much better than that.
redhead, the kind that wears bathing suits below.
Promiscuous, you know, for the 1950s.
And
1930s.
that was his wife. And he made lots of money from the bathtub gin.
So he made bathtub gin and bottled it at home and sold it
I
out
have
of the
no
bar he was
idea
working
where
in?
I have no idea where they bottled it or how they sold it. They had, I guess, people. You know, at that time, the police were kind of crooked,
They got free gin.
so they looked the other way. And it was quite a time.
So when he passed away,
Who?
when your dad passed away, and we went to his apartment, emptied out stuff that was in his apartment, we found something that was a gun? Was something like that?
Well, he did have gun. He had a gun, and that's the reason that I made him stop. He had a license to carry a gun because near the end, his clientele was awful.
Makes
And
sense. Makes sense.
he was robbed many times. So he bought a gun, he registered it, and maybe that was the gun you saw. As a matter of fact, one, I don't know whether my father was working that day or not, but they got a tip. At that point, they had a liquor store and a tavern. They got a tip that they were going to be robbed. So they both, my father's bartender was named Penrod, really big. And Penrod was in one store, my father was in the other. They were attached. And they each had the gun ready. And they came in. And they pointed guns at them. At which point, my father and Penrod shot. No one got hurt. And they ran away. However, when I heard that, I said to my father, "You're not going to work there anymore. It's not worth your life to work there." And that's what started, and he said also, because my mother was really very upset, and that's when they moved down to Bensauken, because I figured the only way I'm going to get him to stop working was saying, "You don't see your grandchildren, here you'll be near your grandchildren," and I harped on his grandchildren, and he stopped.
Do you remember the name of the tavern or liquor store that he had? It was in Newark, right?
It was in Newark on Springfield Avenue, and I don't know the name of the street, and I don't think it really had any name.
Rosenblum's Tavern. Schwartz's Tavern.
Tavern and liquor store.